right, today, not in the studio. We're doing this thing remote. I've got Aaron Jannetti of Endeavor CrossFit and Knife Control Concepts. Aaron, my dude, welcome to the Iron Sights podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
I'm stoked to have you. We were just talking off air for just a second there, and sort of what I had said was, look, man, I love going down these conversations to learn about people's, journey and what they've done and why they're doing it and how, and getting into some of the nooks and crannies. And part of connecting with you today is there's different approaches that I've taken to podcasting. And, as I'm a little bit over the 100 mark, I think we're near like 125 episodes or something like that.
Dude, awesome.
Yeah, but it is awesome. I can't believe it's been that many, but I'm learning that sometimes like coming in very, very researched is good, depending on, maybe goals of both parties. And sometimes I like coming in just kind of, I only know a little bit and let's see where this goes. And that's one of those times. I don't know a ton about you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hopefully I play out relatively well.
I think you will, man. I think I have prided myself on over the years of being a pretty good judge of character, and kind of what you see is what you get. And I've been watching you for a while on the social media stuff, and I've heard about you. Other people have recommended you, so that's awesome. Always good. So let's take this thing where it's going to go, and I'm going to let you go. So here you go, dude. It's your time to shine. Tell me about you. What I should know about you just from the start.
Sweet. Well, one of these days I'll actually get in the studio because we were talking about this before we hit record, but I'm all about face-to-face in person, man. It makes for a great time, but I'm glad we could squeeze in. I wish I would have caught you out and shot. But anyway, next time. But man. I always like these. It always fascinates me with the like, all right, tell us about yourself. Cause it's like, oh man, like, all right, like A, where do I start? And B, like kind of hate talking about myself, one of those deals. But
it's weird, right?
So I run a training center in Columbus, Ohio. So that's where I'm based out of. Endeavor Defense and Fitness. We have half of the gym is a fully functioning CrossFit gym. The other half of the gym, we do all different types of self-defense and fight training, things like that. So we have like our hybrid Krav Maga system, which is our take on Krav Maga. Okay. We have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, heavy bag classes, kickboxing. We do steel mace, a lot of other stuff. We do firearms training as well. So that's like the brick and mortar. I love coaching. I just genuinely I always tell everybody I found it by chance. And thank God I did, because I was in architecture school when I found it, and I was definitely not meant to sit in front of a desk and draw stuff. But so that's the main brick and mortar here in Columbus. And then right now I'm traveling across the country with Eli Knight and Mike Chaney. A lot of people know who Eli Knight is. Really well-known YouTuber. Not just a YouTuber, it's just where a lot of people know him from. But he's a third degree black belt now. I think he just got his third degree black belt. Fantastic guy. And then Mike Chaney, who's my coach, he's another black belt in jiu-jitsu. We travel across the country with Knife Control Concepts, teaching our version of like how to understand the entanglement. And we're hyper focused on open hand versus a knife. So I don't, whether I have a weapon on me or not, I have yet to access it. And so inside of that entanglement, when somebody's dealing with it, generally speaking, that's the craziest, most difficult part, is when I can't get away. I can't just make space. That's, internet comments, oh, just run, just shoot them, all that type stuff. It's like, well, but in that moment where I can't do that, I have to survive the entanglement to get to a position where maybe I can draw my firearm or make space to run away or strike, whatever that is. So that's what we do. We're hyper-focused on that. What hopefully ends up being maybe 3 to 5 seconds of fighting, if I'm really good at it, to get to where I need to get out of it. So it's a very heavily grappling based, or more wrestling based. It's not even grappling. I say grappling, people think like jiu-jitsu and going underneath, which I do jiu-jitsu. Obviously, Mike and Eli do. But it's more wrestling based approach to controlling the entanglement, specifically for dealing with an edged weapon. So we travel across the country teaching seminars on that. We do like 2-day trainings everywhere we go. And then we have an online training program people can access as well. And then that plugs and plays into some other things. So those are the main, things that I've been up to. I wrote a book. You traveled across the country for a long time teaching active shooter primarily for civilians. I am a civilian, so I feel like that's my space. I work with law enforcement departments and military. However, I work with them from the physical tactics standpoint. I've never been a law enforcement officer. I've never done military. So when I work with those departments, those groups, I come out of the gate and go, look, I know how to fight really well. I'm gonna teach you how to do it, and then you can fix it to your context. But I taught ASR was the program we ran for a long time, active shooter response. Traveled around, taught like 80 plus of those through 2016, which is, as we all remember, when things were really in the eyes of the public. People were actually seeking out a lot more training. Wrote a book on that topic in 2017, how to survive an active killer. So that copy's out there floating some other places. Got a couple online instructionals and things like that. But primarily, I consider myself a coach and a student. And I'm always trying to learn new things, and I love sharing things. I love getting out and having the opportunity to actually introduce other people to different dynamics of what it takes to survive. Hell, realistically, life. You know what I mean? Like we do the fitness. The fitness element. I've seen, a lot of the stuff that you put out, and it's really awesome because you have elements talking about nutrition, you have elements talking about overall fitness, and shooting and everything from it. And that's the reality of it. Like, you gotta, if you want to really survive, it's more than just the scope of like go do jujitsu and learn how to fight or go learn how to shoot a firearm. It's like there's a lot going on there. So that space, for me it's been super positively impactful in my life. And I enjoy coaching. I enjoy sharing that with other people. So like, long story short, I love coaching. And these are all the things that I do right now as far as coaching goes.
That was a great job with the bio, and there were so many things in there that I obviously did not know about that I want to touch on with you. But first, just kind of how you finished that, and that is you love coaching, and that's apparent. And that was one of the first things that I kind of picked up. I mean, you see people out when I say picked up, I see it from afar, see it digitally, and kind of hear. And there's a couple of ways I think people do that. First off, it's how flashy is this is not necessarily you, but how flashy is the video? How edgy is the concept? How cool is the move? Whatever else. And they're trying to create excitement around something else. And that you can only manufacture that, I think, for so long. And when you bring it back to, who's doing it and the why they're doing it, which I want to talk to you, in depth about today, you can feel that, man. It's palpable that you love what you do. And not only do you love what you do, you've gone all in with it and all in on yourself, surrounded yourself with people, as you mentioned, you dropped a couple of names there and some of the things you've done with people to help you be better at that and also put you in a position to continue to do what you love doing, which is the coaching. And you put that sort of first. It just keeps coming up in your bio there. And all the things that you have coached and all the things you've done. So I want to acknowledge that, I've said this on the show before, from one coach to another, that is very refreshing. I love that. A couple things, just digging back. One, cool. Dude, you've been a busy dude over the last few years. I mean, that is a lot of stuff. But one of the things that intrigues me about this is your connection to law enforcement, right? As a civilian, because that is a tough barrier to break through. And I imagine there's quite a story behind that. So let's dig out the pieces in the story first. Let's talk about the BJJ and where that got started for you, how you got into martial arts or specifically jiu-jitsu, and talk a little bit about that journey, because I love hearing how people are introduced to it and where it fits into their life.
Yeah, man, totally. So I actually found, as an adult, I say adult in quotes, theoretically by age I was an adult, but maturity level probably not so much.
I'm still not an adult.
Exactly right. But by age, legally, I was an adult. My martial arts training as an adult, I actually found Krav Maga first. And I've told this story before a little more in depth. In the past, when I found Krav, I had just a myriad of very bad things happen to me in a very short period of time. And I was an angry, 21-year-old kid, essentially. And I was either going to get in trouble, and I was on Ohio State campus it's a big enough party school to get in enough trouble and spend your time drinking and starting fights. Yeah. Or I was going to find something, somewhere to put whatever that energy was. And I happened to, you remember the show Fight Quest? Like forever ago? Yeah. So I literally happened to see the Krav Maga episode of Fight Quest and talk about good marketing. Ohio Krav Maga and Fitness, which was a gym in Gahanna, which is on the east side of Columbus, paid for advertisements during Fight Quest so it was like perfect. It was like, oh, this is badass. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wow, there's a place 20 minutes from where I'm at. Yes. So I went and found that first, actually. And thank God I did, because that was the best decision I've ever made. Completely changed my life. I joined that gym and I never left. So I started in Krav Maga, and how I ended up in jiu-jitsu was that Mark Slane, the gentleman that was running Ohio Krav Maga and Fitness, was smart enough to know, even though he was a black belt in Krav Maga, that there was stuff outside of Krav Maga. So he actually brought in a BJJ program. He brought in a kickboxing program to, supplement what we were doing. So I was first introduced to BJJ by my Krav Maga instructor. He got me into jiu-jitsu. And then when he started to realize, like, hey, as a group, as a unit, we're only getting so far with jiu-jitsu. Well, Arthur Ruff at the time had just moved to Columbus, Ohio. And at the time, I think he was a second degree black belt. This was like back in 2008, I think. And so he paid for a couple of us to go over and start training with Arthur at Arthur's place to get that much better at BJJ and start to get into it that way. So that was how I was actually introduced to jiu-jitsu, was by my, the guy that introduced me to Krav Maga. And then from there, I was with Arthur got my blue belt with Arthur. And then I opened up a gym for the gentleman that opened up his other one. We opened up a second Krav Maga location. And I was the BJJ meme, which was like, I got my blue belt and then just kind of faded off into the abyss for like 3 years. And then,
I love that.
Right. And I kept in it, however, not as consistently. And I didn't have a really consistent coach for quite a while. So I was doing a little bit of wrestling. I was doing a little bit of grappling, but not a ton of it. And then in 2013, I stepped away from that facility to open up my own in Denver, which is where we're at now. And luckily, along the way of developing a BJJ program here, we were blessed with two really awesome instructors, a gentleman by the name of Justin Kennedy, and then Mike Cheney, who's one of my very good friends and currently my coach. The gym that they were at just had a terrible implosion with one of the head instructors just doing some very inappropriate things. So they were looking for a space to train. They came here. And so I started training under them, and I've since gotten I'm a 2-stripe brown belt currently in jiu-jitsu specifically. So, again, it's my Krav Maga instructor is the guy that actually introduced me to the art of jiu-jitsu. And then I took my legs to follow it and stick with it.
That's an interesting journey. Like it's usually one or the other when we're talking Krav Maga and BJJ, that there's usually not a combo there. People, your BJJ, Muay Thai, grappling, maybe some weapon stuff you'll see people out in there, but the Krav Maga BJJ thing is really not a thing. So that's interesting to me. Can you maybe just real quick for the people that aren't really familiar? So when you go back, when you mentioned the term memes, there's a lot of BJJ memes and there's a lot of Krav Maga memes. And you're coming at this from a little bit of a different perspective. Can you kind of explain to people Krav Maga? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the BJJ meme is like the joke is that anytime anybody gets a blue belt in BJJ, because it's relatively difficult to get a blue belt in BJJ. Like it takes time, it takes getting smashed and feeling terrible. And then by the time you get you get your blue belt, you start realizing I'm still nowhere near good at this.
The journey really hasn't even begun yet.
It really hasn't even started.
Conditioned. Yeah.
Yeah. So the joke is always that everybody gets their blue belt and then just disappears. It's like, hey, I got my blue belt and then I'm out. And it's kind of like where a lot of people end their journey at blue belt, which is unfortunate and it's true. So that's the meme as far as that goes. However, Krav Maga, so I had a really interesting conversation with the group at Elbows Tight, and they run a podcast specifically for jiu-jitsu. Most people, when they think about Krav Maga and BJJ, or the judgment that'll take place oftentimes with Krav Maga and BJJ, and we'll talk kind of what the two programs are, they don't actually know what the other one does. So they're really making a judgment call based off of things they've seen on social media. And the problem now is, like, I can find terrible examples of jiu-jitsu on social media and amazing examples of jiu-jitsu on social media. And I can find terrible examples of Krav Maga and amazing examples of Krav Maga. And I mean, we can do that with anything. We can do that with firearms. We can do it with fitness. So it's very easy to...
Can I time you out for just a second? It's hard when we're in this this digital space, that if we were in the same room together, there wouldn't be these interruptions. So apologies to you in the audience with the delays here. But Aaron, that is exactly why I'm asking the question, because it's so much like this. It's like this in fitness. It's like this. So when you're talking like exercises, whatever, it's like this in nutrition. It's like this in firearms training. Now we're going to the BJJ Krav Maga thing. So that's why I asked this, because I think people can relate to this, that you can get on anywhere and you can see a highlight reel and you can see somebody's opinion and you can see somebody doing the move perfect or this or that or shit talking somebody else all over the place. But a lot of the times when people are getting their perception or making up their mind or their decision about what something is or isn't, number one, it's based on their own experience. So if you don't, and number two, it's based on knowledge. So, or you could swap those things however you want, but that is why I'm asking the question, because most people looking at it have no fucking idea what they're looking at. Yet they're hot to trot to get on that keyboard and start going off in the comments section or post a Instagram live or whatever else. So anyway, that's why I wanted you to answer. Thank you, man.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing, is it's like, look, there's great examples of everything. You know what I mean? So if you look at like what is Krav Maga, what is jiu-jitsu as far as the breakdowns and things go, Krav Maga is what Krav Maga is supposed to be. And so let's try to do that. If you look at encompass what it's supposed to be, and then understand that every gym's going to do it differently, whether that's right or wrong. So kind of, it is what it is. So what Krav Maga is supposed to be an approach that takes, the best elements from all these other places, gets rid of anything that has nothing to do with practical self-defense, and then packages it into one tiny little system. So the idea behind it is, if you have little training, if you're not an athlete, if you're not pursuing a sport and your main purpose is self-defense, and that is, I want to take care of my kids, I want to take care of my family in some form or fashion, then my training should be revolved explicitly around that. So that's what Krav Maga is supposed to be.
What's the use case? Yeah,
what's your context, right? So in theory, that's what it's supposed to be, which means there should be elements of striking. That's where they steal from boxing and kickboxing. There should be elements of grappling. So they're stealing from judo and wrestling and jiu-jitsu. There should be elements of both weapons defense and understanding offensive use of weapons. So we're stealing from arts like Kali, and then from various firearms instructors. So that's what it's supposed to be. And where Krav Maga usually gets a bad name, and it's justified too, is when it came to the States, very heavily driven in starting an adult martial art. And you got to remember, in the 90s, when this was coming out, or at least trying to come big, there weren't adult martial arts programs. It was like Taekwondo, it was still the hot spot, and karate and things like that. But creating an industry of adult martial arts for everybody, as opposed to just the batshit crazy people that want to do MMA, and that's myself in that camp, by the way. Besides them, there wasn't an industry for that. So they had to create that industry. So there was a lot of marketing around it. And so you heard a lot of terms about this is intuitive. It's super fast to learn. You're also going to get a good workout. And then you had these celebrities jumping on and talking about how positive of, this is a great workout and all that type of stuff. So they started getting this, they latched onto that because it's good marketing. Marketing is marketing, right? As far as it comes down to it. So people latched onto that, and it started coming into it's watered down, it's bullcrap, it's all that. And don't get me wrong, some of the programs are. However, the majority of people that are showing up, not necessarily, but the majority of people that are showing up for a fun way to learn fitness are going to get more out of a Krav Maga class, and they'll actually show up to a Krav Maga class and learn a little bit about self-defense than they would if you tried to market them with jujitsu or wrestling or kickboxing, like Thai boxing, right? So a lot of people forget that the demographic essentially for Krav Maga is people that just want to learn how to defend themselves, right?
Mhm.
Now, in a good world, they should be talking about, like what Craig would refer to as managing unknown contacts. How do I do my verbalization? How am I preparing myself and understanding, the elements of my field of vision and awareness? And you should also be talking about striking, and you should also be talking about good grappling and things like that. When I went through Krav Maga, like there was, maybe 5% of the program was grounded. And so there was a huge gap in it. Now, some of the systems, or I should say, some of the affiliations or associations have definitely caught up. They've definitely implemented wrestling and Krav Maga or Jiu-Jitsu. However, there was a huge gap in it. So Jiu-Jitsu coming in and saying like, well, if shit hits the fan and you go down to the floor, you guys are screwed. They weren't wrong. It's
Right.
just, again, for most people, if I can't fight standing up, well, let's not talk about the floor just yet. Like I need to keep these people on their feet to start with. So Krav Maga is supposed to be, if it's developed and taught very well, it's supposed to be self-defense. It's supposed to be all the elements of actual self-defense, not,
It's not a
well,
sport.
exactly. There's no sport element to it. It's supposed to be, I want to get home safe. End of story. So it's allowed to be ugly. It's allowed to be violent and aggressive. We have to talk about legal and all that type of stuff if it's done properly.
But it looks
Is it always done properly? Not necessarily.
it looks unorthodox though when you look at a typical martial art, right? Where there's structure. It looks unstructured is what it looks like if you're looking at it from afar. And from a marketing perspective, you're probably trying to show the flashy shit because the very fundamental stuff isn't going to be exciting for anybody to look at or watch, and they're not going to understand that. But when you see people flying around and what looks like practically flailing and going all out, that looks like a street fight. Right.
Yeah.
And so people can relate to, well, I've seen that happen before, whether it was on the schoolyard as a kid or at the bar with my friends or, whatever at the park or wherever else, like, whatever situation they may have seen. I think they can relate to that versus I put a gi on, I get down on the floor, there's a bunch of people with belts rolling around. It's sweaty, it looks slow. And the next thing you know, I'm getting choked out or I'm in an arm bar. I get it. Now, what Jiu-Jitsu has had the opportunity to do over time is the marketing has gotten massive. I mean, now people understand, they've seen it through, you just mentioned it, through MMA and how proficient people are and how effective it can be. So I think there's a little bit more of an acceptance to it. And they're also looking at it as a form of fitness. How do I, and also mental, kind of a mental release or, church for that, for lack of a better term, to get out and do that. And it's very family friendly. Like I can take my 5-year-old to jiu-jitsu and they're going to have fun with the kids, but they're also going to learn some more practical skills. And I'm just going to say it, more than what they learn maybe in a Taekwondo class from a self-defense perspective or meeting up with the schoolyard bully, going back to that example. And I can be in one room, they can be in another. Mom's cool with this. Like, this just makes sense versus going into a Krav Maga spot and or looking at it and going, that looks pretty wild. So
well, you will be surprised, or you might be surprised. I don't know, but really, there are some programs that run really good kids Krav Maga programs, and they run the elements of those in. But the one thing that, again, you've got to remember, it comes down oftentimes to like, what do I need to do to get people through the door versus, like you said, like what are the practical elements of it and things like that. So for instance, like I'll give you an idea here. Like, again, we run our version of what we refer to as, hybrid Krav Maga here. However, for the kids, we start kids in grappling for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, most of the cases they're going to run into in a bully situation are going to be more socially, like managed in a socially acceptable manner with good grappling, right?
Gotcha.
Now, right? So bully gets into that position. I can manage space. I can grapple my way in, maybe pin him to the ground. I can look at the teacher while I'm sprawling this kid out and look like, I tried to talk to him. I tried to talk to you. None of you did this. At least I'm not bashing his face in. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, there was no, like, generally speaking, I mean, it's crazy times and I don't want to minimize things out there, but these are fist fights, right? These are pushing matches, whatever. These are not people bringing weapons into it, and we're not trying to steal purses, wallets, belongings, cars, anything like that. it's just this is what humans do.
Yeah.
They have confrontations.
Yeah. And
right? Yeah.
and I will also put out that no matter what it is, whether they're doing Krav Maga or jiu-jitsu or wrestling or boxing, whatever it is, like whatever you start your kid in, there's an element of confidence and stature and overall the way you carry yourself. If you have a good coach that's also teaching you how to manage the emotional and communication side of it, we're going to have a lot less of these situations just in general, because these kids are not going to be walking themselves into it, either by backing down in a way that, again, makes them look like a victim to prey, which is what it is, right? If I'm the big bully, I'm not looking for a good fight. I'm looking for the person that's not going to be a good fight, because obviously I have some weird insecurity that I need to flex on other people for. Why would I flex on somebody that can actually, whoop my ass? So in a bully situation, like, I don't want my kid to just be, cowering, because that's a sign that's going to draw that on. I also don't want my kid getting so overtly angry and flexed and emotionally triggered by words from somebody else that they're instigating a fight. So I want to have a kid that has enough confidence and understands enough about communication that they can actually simply let words bounce off them, ignore the situation, have the confidence in their physical skills that if something were to happen, they can actually manage that fight and deal with it and keep themselves safe, and hopefully do it inside of the whatever crazy justification that is going on in whatever school they're in. But the reality of it is, like, it's more than just the what art am I setting my kid up for? It's like, who is teaching them the art? Because I can send you to some BJJ gyms where, their mentality is, kill, 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 highly competitive, 500 miles an hour. And that kid's going to end up with a complex by the time he's 22, because he's going to be so obsessed with his overall output in life and his performance and competition that when he finds out he's not the next Gordon Ryan, he's going to hate himself by the time he's in his mid-20s. And it's like, that's not good either, man. Like, BJJ is supposed to be something that is enhancing this kid's life. So now we start kids in grappling because, like I said, it builds a lot of confidence. It's going to lower some of the overall just liability and risk in general of them learning and being able to strike together and all that type of stuff. And it's a good baseline. However, I will still make the argument to this day that from self-defense specifically, like, if you really want to bury this down and you want to say, okay, I'm never going to a Krav Maga class ever, I just want to learn grappling, so I'm going to go learn BJJ for self-defense. I will take a wrestler with 6 months over a BJJ student with 6 months, 5-1, like, all day. Because what is wrestling? Wrestling is constant pressure. It's being on top and it's smashing people into the floor. And if you look from a self-defense perspective, that is what you should be so hyperly focused on. So realistically, like, you could take a Krav Maga guy with 6 months, a BJJ guy with 6 months, and a wrestler with 6 months of training with the same equal amount of training. Put them in any rule set that allows the Krav Maga person not to, like, elbow their freaking head into the ground and stab them with a knife. And let's be real, the wrestler's probably whooping the snot out of both of them, top to bottom. So for a kid, I personally want to start the kid in a grappling-based system that's a little more wrestling heavy if you're looking at self-defense. Now, if you're looking at the art of BJJ, do the art of BJJ. I do BJJ. I love BJJ. Like I said, I'm a 2-stripe brown belt. I am closer to black belt than I feel comfortable with in any way, shape, or form. Yet, I want one. But when I get there, I want to feel like I got there. You know what I mean? Like one of those. So it's a really weird place to be at the moment. So, like, I love the art. I love the playfulness in it. I love the exploration that goes into BJJ. However, if we're being honest, I have never been in a jiu-jitsu gym, and I've been in a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms. I have never been in a jiu-jitsu gym that actually focuses on what we can define as actual self-defense. Elements of jiu-jitsu, a lot of very good elements of jiu-jitsu can be utilized in a self-defense situation, but I have yet to walk into a gym. They might say, hey guys, we're working on self-defense today, and it'll be like standing rear naked choke defense, and it ends up just being a hip toss, which again, we can have fun talking about that. But the reality of it is, like, you can't just say this is self-defense. What is the context of self-defense? Well, there's verbalization, there's confidence issues, there's learning to run away. There's knowing how to deal with a weapon if there is a weapon. There's knowing if you carry a weapon, how to train with that weapon. There's understanding how to strike. There's understanding like the psychology, like what happens after a self-defense situation. Like you talk about like, oh, here's this women's self-defense program and, we're going to help you gain confidence around this thing. And it's like, well, what is the biggest thing that females fear? Like, why are they pursuing this? And it's like, okay, a situation where I'm pinned down and raped, I'm sexually abused against my will. Do you understand the psychological elements of that? And you can't just say, well, they're getting in and they're tussling it up with other guys and that stuff will come naturally. It's like, no, there is a psychological element to self-defense where we need to not only be setting them up with the practical skills to be able to deal with these situations, but hopefully the practical skills to avoid the situation to start with. And then if they're forced into the situation and they do fight themselves out of it, to then deal with whatever the psychological aftermath of it is as well. And I have yet to be in any jiu-jitsu gym that has sat down and said like, hey guys, here's the way it is after a violent encounter. This is the psychology that comes with it. This is how we prepare ourselves. Let's talk about breath work. Let's talk about like, the way and, who you can contact and how does journaling impact these type things and how do we get into that stuff? It's martial arts to me are phenomenal and they're fantastic. I've trained Kali, I've trained Thai boxing, I've trained boxing, I do firearms. I do a ton of jiu-jitsu. I love the art of judo. I really want to find somebody locally that does like really pure sambo. I want to learn a little more about like how that's actually taught and trained. Hell, man, I want to start going back and taking karate and taekwondo again. I used to be able to head kick people, like snap them off there. Can't do that stuff anymore. I traded that out for like a 380-pound squat. But yeah,
it's counterproductive, dude.
It's a little counterproductive. Yeah, it's like they kind of do this one way or the other. But I think the biggest thing that frustrates me when most people try to like flex on, what's the best martial art for self-defense is they forget that martial arts are martial arts. They're not self-defense. Even Krav Maga, and again, I technically have 2 black belts in Krav Maga from 2 different organizations. I still believe in the system of Krav Maga for people that want to learn thoroughbred self-defense. However, Krav Maga, the way it is presented, is still a list of techniques. And it has to be. It's the only way to scale it out, right? So it's still a list of techniques. BJJ is still just a list of techniques. Any other art you can plug in there. Those are martial arts. Self-defense to me is the context. It's all of the things that come into surviving a violent encounter. And to me, where Krav Maga gets closer to that is they at least talk about the verbalization. They're at least setting people up to be using their words and keeping back space and using kicks and understanding how to block punches and, only showing techniques that for the most part, somebody can pick up relatively quickly, do relatively ugly and aggressively and violently, and match it a little more to what maybe a real self-defense situation looks like. And we can get people moving aggressively faster. Like if I start training with you and I'm only going to train 1 hour a week and I don't know this and you don't know this, but 5 weeks from now, I'm going to get attacked. Somebody's going to jump me at 1 o'clock in the morning while I'm walking to my car after a late shift at work. I've had 5 hours of training. You're going to tell me right now that if I happen to show up at the gym when they started a leg lock series or a deep half series or even a fundamental mount series and the fight never went to the ground and I never got into mount because I was choked up against my car and they started beating the shit out of me with their fists and then drew a knife, I probably have a better shot if I was put through some high intensity, ugly, aggressive stress drills. I learned how to hit really hard. I learned how to scream. I learned how to turn around and sprint. I learned how to flail, but intentionally and aggressively. You're going to probably get more out of that in 5 hours than you are 5 hours of, again, whatever the jiu-jitsu focus was in some form or fashion. Now, in the long run, am I going to take, like a 6-month Krav Maga person and put them against even a mid-level purple belt in a fight out in the streets, quote unquote? Like, no, yeah, sure. The mid-level purple belt's going to walk circles around that person. They're going to at least be able to manage space. They're going to be able to pull themselves through some spots. But how long does it take somebody to get to that level in jiu-jitsu? if I'm a single parent and I work, 2 jobs, like my mother was a single parent. She raised 3 kids. She worked 3 jobs. And when she did have time to take, do something for herself, maybe it was 1 hour a week. Man, if that's the case that you're in, you're not going to get enough out of a taekwondo or a jujitsu than you would if you went and, I mean, honestly, I tell people all the time, like, if you don't have access to a gym and you only have 1 hour a week, go buy a, $100 heavy bag from a local, refurbished freaking Play It Again Sports or something like that, and set a Tabata clock and run sprints on Tabata, beat the hell out of a heavy bag on, Tabata, and just get aggressive. Because that's going to be way more impactful than, learning kata or breaking through technique for guard breaks. It's just going to be way more impactful that way. But that's the through the lens of self-defense. And I think people get taken aback by that and they think I'm bashing jujitsu. Like, I spend more time currently training jujitsu than I train anything else, because to me, it's my favorite thing in the world to do right now. It's like, it's chess with human bodies. It's fantastic.
But you can do it. So here's the thing. Look, I love where you're going with this, and that's why I wanted to go long on this particular conversation, and again, why I asked the question from the get-go. Because again, I love what you were saying there about the, if I only have 1 hour a week and I'm genuinely looking for a self-defense class, not a fitness / martial arts / I'm in this for the long haul, maybe. I'm looking for a new tribe to work out with or be around a few days a week for a few hours or whatever else. I get where you're coming from, and I think a lot of people probably can relate to this. And I don't hear you bashing jiu-jitsu. What I hear you doing is making a comparison and asking people at their very best to look at it through a different lens. Now, you obviously have a very different lens than maybe I do, or maybe Cece does, my partner. So if she's taking this into account, she's looking at it as like, what's relatable to me. So you mentioned a couple of things there about the rear naked choke, standing, as a form of self-defense. I don't see, like, when we see, and this is just, again, this is a little bit of a different lens, but when if I look at videos, right, and I see these violent, very, very violent, and a lot of times I mean, you can put the word evil next to it. Things happen. These real life video, things that have been captured on videos and in all these different places. What generally happens? It happens very fast. The weapon comes out right away. There is no guessing. There's no conversation. It's oftentimes very planned. Somebody's been lying in wait. So you're already the victim, that is way behind the power curve right from the get-go. There is no feeling out. There is time to feel things out, like how strong is this person? How weak is this person? How do they move? How do they not move? It gets ugly really, really fast. And I think the speed piece is something that I think people, when they watch it, they can just look at it and go, oh my God, if that guy got his hands on me, I'm not sure I could defend myself, or I know I can't defend myself. And so I think that is very relatable. And I like what you're doing there in terms of the comparing and contrasting, because if it did go to the ground, then, there's definitely some techniques and some things where the jiu-jitsu is going to work. Or maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's going to help. It's going to maybe be a little bit more helpful. But the reality of it is that very rarely happens. If the victim goes to the ground, or even if the aggressor goes to the ground, there's a lot of flopping around. And again, if a weapon's been brought to the situation, it's oftentimes after somebody's been stabbed or somebody's been shot, and it's just a matter of seconds before whoever that person is now out of the game. They're literally bleeding to death in the course of whatever this process of this attack is. So I hear you, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. And you mentioned just run away. Well, that's not always an option. Or, we'll stand and we'll box, and at one point it goes to the ground, then I'm going to have jujitsu, so I'm going to have the advantage of you. I got to tell you, if you're 150 pounds, and you're up against a 250 pounder, I honestly, and that person's starting to drop bombs on you, and you're trying to work moves or whatever else, you get hit in the face by somebody that's 100 more pounds than you. I don't care what jiu-jitsu you know. I don't. That's going to stun. It's probably going to stop you in your tracks. It's not everybody. Everybody's, things can happen. But I think there's this how do I respond in a way that keeps me from getting to that point where I even have to use jujitsu.
Yeah.
And if it's not a firearm or a force multiplier of some kind, what could it be? So I think you're making a good case. I think you're making a good case for this, and I don't hear you, saying one's better than the other. I heard you say exactly the opposite. Like there's these different pieces, and the reason you focus on jujitsu, and this is maybe one of the things I was going to say, is I think there's a little bit more longevity in it. Like I can go to the studio, I can spar for an hour. I don't really know anything about sparring for Krav Maga, but when I look at it and the intensity of it, it's very short lived, right? Because that's what you're practicing to do. Versus jujitsu, I can get on the mat and I could literally roll for hours if I had that much time and somebody to do it with. And the output and the intensity, right, and the longevity of that, I can do that for a while. Again, contributes to my fitness, my mental health, all these other things where maybe this other martial art doesn't. That's just my take, man, and what I'm kind of pulling away from you.
It's the same with kickboxing. Like even if you were, you can only take, you have to play this curve. If you're thinking long term, you get to play this curve. You don't have to, you can choose to. But like, what am I trying to get out of this? How long am I trying to do it for? Where am I trying to take this as far as context goes? And when I was introduced to kickboxing very early on, it was very unregulated, and it worked for me. I was in my early 20s. I was a pissed off, angry kid. I needed to be hit. I needed to hit people. So like I learned okay through grit. But the way I learned kickboxing was not the way that any normal, sane human being should learn kickboxing. I learned how to keep my hands, like don't block kicks with your hands. I learned that because they literally would wait until I dropped my hands to block a kick and would punch me in the head. And it was like after about the 39th time, it's like, oh, maybe I should keep my hands up.
It's the same with me, man. I was the big guy that walked into the gym. The first thing they did was put me in the ring. They're like, oh, this is fresh meat. And they beat the shit out of me.
I was 155 pounds, man. And my first fight, well, it wasn't even just traditional kickboxing. It was just fighting. So it was a mixture of, grounded fighting and stand-up kickboxing. But my very first class that I ever went into, we did a freaking bull ring. And it was me versus 7 other people. Yeah, I got a fresh fighter every minute. And the 1 minute was stand up. The next minute start on the ground, stand up ground, stand up ground. And everybody in that class had been there for at least 6 months, if not like 2 or 3 years. And I had never done it once.
But my experience was with Muay Thai. It wasn't boxing. And brother, like it was.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, it was trial by fire. That's one way to learn, right? That's one way.
It's not a good way.
That's the quickest way to get somebody out of there, right? I mean, I wanted to go back because that's just the mindset that I had and who I was and had something to prove and whatever else. But yeah, you do that to a normal, sane person, and it's probably going to be the end of it for them.
Well, and you can do that in BJJ too. And I think that's important as people are, as we're having this conversation, like, look at your context and how long you're going to be in it and what you want to get out of it. But also understand like every gym has something a little bit different to offer. And you can do that in jiu-jitsu too, man. You go into some places where, maybe it's just one individual, maybe it's a couple individuals, or maybe it's the atmosphere. But I mean, there are people that's just like every round is a competition round. Every round is like me versus you. And you miss that team training element, which is like, I'm going to push you to whatever you need to push you, but I also want to make sure you stay safe. I'm not doing anything that's going to be dangerous for you. And in a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms, I would say that the vast majority, I don't see that problem. However, again, like, if you've only got one jiu-jitsu gym within, a 30-minute drive of you, and it happens to be some dude that, did a little bit of wrestling and then was an amateur MMA fighter for like 2 or 3 years and then decided to open up, a fight club in his neighborhood, that might not be, even though jiu-jitsu is a great art and it can be good for longevity overall, that might not be the place you want to be going. Right. And like you said, people make judgments based off experiences and rightfully so, but you also don't want that poor experience to be your judgment of the art of jiu-jitsu, right? And that's the dichotomy on both sides of that is there's different gyms for different people based off what you want to get out of it and everything that goes into it. And you can't just, Krav Maga is better, BJJ is better, kickboxing is better. It's no, like it's so individualized. What do you need? What do you want to get out of it? And honestly, that's why we do things the way we do it here. So we have a Krav Maga program and a jiu-jitsu program and a kickboxing program. And we do heavy bag classes and we do focused mid boxing classes and we do steel mace and we do mobility work and we do strength and conditioning because it should be holistic. Krav Maga is not enough. BJJ is not enough. Kickboxing is not enough. So we bring it all under one roof so that you can get a little bit of everything. And we tell our Krav Maga students that. Like I look at them. So for instance, to get a black belt under me, we don't really even call it our Krav Maga black belt, but I don't do Krav Maga black belts. To get a black belt under me, you have to have gone through all 5 levels of our Krav Maga program. You have to have at least a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. You have to have at least 50 hours of live fire training. You have to have at least have gone to 4 other seminars with somebody. And we do like a whole list of, who we think is good. So like Rogue Methods and Fit to Fight and ShivWorks. And like, you need to go see these guys too. There's a reading list that involves psychology and training and, mental status and violence. And you can't even apply or show up to take it unless you have satisfied all these things. You have to have done live competition for jiu-jitsu. So it's like, to me, that's really what I want to get in people's heads is none of these programs are enough. You should be thinking about the psychology. You should be thinking about, your communication and your language. You should know how to shoot even if you hate firearms. You should know how to shoot. You should know how to use a knife. You should know and understand, what it takes to get in there. You should be good at grappling. You should be good at kickboxing and get those whole elements in. And to me, that's self-defense. Right. Now, if you want to just do kickboxing, awesome. Like more power to you. If you want to just do BJJ, awesome. If you want to just do Krav Maga, just don't come to me and say, don't flex and say that we're the best. It's like, no, it's different, it's different strokes for different folks. It's like, what do they need? And as long as we're honest about the needs and the context, to me, that's the smarter conversation, in my experience.
I think it's a really good way to or place to transition here. And you're right, man. In a lot of ways. And I think, especially that last statement you just made, I don't think a lot of people can argue with that. A lot of people might try, but I think what you said there about the smarter conversation, the smart ones, the ones that care, the ones that actually do appreciate the lens and the lenses that you're talking about, would agree with you 100%. And to the BJJ point too about, and this is any martial arts studio, whether it's Taekwondo, Muay Thai, whatever. I think you were mentioning about, hey, there's a lot of places out there that could probably be doing a much better job. I would like to think that most places really are doing a fairly good job with this, or at least their intention is to do the best job they possibly can versus that other thing. So, for those people that are listening out there, they're going, yeah, see, he just proved the point. That's why I don't go, because it's just a bunch of dudes beating up on one another. No, that isn't what Aaron said. No. Aaron said that might be a situation for you, that might not be the best place for you to go. And for other people, maybe it's the perfect place for that matter.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I will say this, and I think you'll be able to attest to this. Those places don't survive long as a business. So it's,
and you can read that right away on the people.
Top. Yeah.
Yeah. You can read that right away when you walk in. You won't know
until you go. Yeah. And one of the things that I encourage people when they are looking, because look, and again, like we talked about earlier, like everybody should be training some semblance of fighting. It solves a lot of problems with you internally, psychologically, the way you handle stress, anxiety, whatever it is. Everybody should. Everybody doesn't. Most people don't. Everybody should, right? So you should be pursuing someplace, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. However, I also encourage people to look, if you walk into a place, the moment you feel genuinely uncomfortable, first, use your words. Hey, I'm feeling this way. Is this normal, or am I just intimidated to be here? Because that can happen too. I mean, people are nervous to come see us, and we really like to make sure that people have this awesome first experience, and we really walk them through the stages of intensity and all that type of stuff. So it could just be your perception of it. So use your words, ask, hey, I'm feeling this way. Is this normal? I came here for this. It's totally cool if it's how you do it. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. And then their response right out of the gate should give you a pretty good idea of where the rest of this is going to go. If I go, hey, I think this guy's moving a little bit too fast for me. Is it okay if we slow down? Is this normal? And they're like, yeah, man, just fucking do it. It's like, okay, you know what? This maybe isn't for me. I'm going to pick my stuff up. I'm going to go to leave. So like, get yourself into a position and ask, you're new, ask the questions that are on your mind, just say them out loud. And then if you don't like the response or you don't like the atmosphere, pick up and walk out the door. That's the other thing, like be comfortable going by your way, and then you can move on to the next place.
This is conflict resolution in life, dude.
100%. Yeah.
and that's what you were saying. Like, so everybody should be doing this, right? It teaches you so many things, and it gives you that self-confidence to carry yourself in a different way, and to ultimately ask the question, like, hey man, you're being a little aggressive. Am I feeling weird right now? Or is this me or is this you? Like, what's really going on? Depending on the response you get, it's time for me to leave versus might be time for me to fight.
Right?
The person that's been in it a while is going to start recognizing that way ahead of time. Like, this isn't a good situation for me. That's that situational awareness that comes with it. With that confidence, like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. So it's time for me to go. Just one of the things that you pick up that I think is very much overlooked. I mean, you just nailed it with that.
Yeah, man. So yeah, go train.
So let's fucking train, and stop shitting on other people's training. Just train, and then maybe try some different stuff.
Look, I got a buddy here that does like Aikido and in some weird, I say weird respectfully because I just don't understand it. But like an old school samurai, like an old school samurai training and things like that. And like he also does jiu-jitsu, he also does Krav Maga, right? So like all of that stuff is great. If you're doing Taekwondo, go do it. Just as long as you understand why you're doing it. Like he knows there is zero chance he's going to be walking out in public and pull out his samurai sword and have to defend himself against another samurai with a sword. He knows that.
Wait, that's what?
Right? But he loves the art, and he learns a lot about movement and mechanics and sabertronics and generation of force. Like, just know what you're doing with it. I respect the hell out of anybody that goes and trains anything. So don't shit on anybody's training.
Yeah, it sounds weird to me.
Don't come at me with a samurai sword and say like, yeah, I've been training self-defense. It's like, no, you've been training murder
right?
and a lot of big issues, right? Which I'm okay with. Justified murder is cool, but like, all right, you're walking around picking fights with a samurai sword. But anyway, I apologize, Scott. Go ahead, let's go.
That's funny. So speaking of swords, right? And we were just talking about the Krav Maga and the whole thing. And I was talking about transitioning. Let's transition into knife control concepts.
Sure.
Because going back to the Krav Maga, this makes sense. We're talking about weapons manipulation, self-defense, and then use of, force multipliers. There's a lot of, we're starting to see a little bit more of this pop up out there. There's some big names. Maybe you'll drop some of them. I think you already did, just some of the people that you're working with. But, talk about knife control concepts, what it is that you're teaching, and how it is that you're teaching it outside of the typical stuff, all the things that we've already mentioned. And here's a couple of things that I'm curious to know about. First off, like, who's coming to these classes, like, and who's taking this stuff, who's most interested. And the other part is like, you got into you mentioned earlier that you've crossed this barrier into working with law enforcement as a civilian. And so I'm curious how that fits in for you specifically with regard to knife control concepts.
Sure. Yeah. So the KCC program, it's like I said, it's our look at handling the entanglement. So there's, just as I was talking about earlier, like self-defense should have striking and all that type of stuff. This program has zero striking in it. It's all about learning to manage the entanglement. And for those listening in that are like, he keeps using this word entanglement, literally picture you physically entangled with another person. That's what it is. So somebody holding onto your shirt, somebody grabbing you and framing while they're stabbing you, somebody trying to access the blade, within close quarters. So it's our answer to learning how to manage that. Now, in my experience, and I can only speak to my experience in teaching knife defense stuff, we previously, when most things are taught, we're taught a series of techniques in a very specific order. And then when you get into live training, scenario training, whatever you want to call it, or real world violence, nothing ever follows a specific order. So what it actually, ever. So violence starts to become more about decision making. So how quickly can I observe what's happening, whether you want to go through OODA loop and all that kind of fun stuff, but how quickly can I bring in information, process information, and make a decision? Like that's really, I think, the most important part. And in my experience, the ability to do that comes from exposure. So the more times I am exposed to something, the faster I will recognize that it is happening and or about to happen, and the sooner I can decide to act against it, right? And this is fighting in general, even in boxing.
Sure.
Like if you look at Mayweather, and his like defensive strategy for boxing, Mayweather is not, it's not that he's like reading everything perfectly. It's that he has literally stood across and watched hundreds of thousands of right hooks come at his head. So he can pick up on mannerisms, patterns, body mechanics, and he's in his brain already decided that they're about to throw, a right hook, right uppercut, whatever, and he's already moving. And so he's doing that because he's been exposed to it hundreds of thousands of times.
Can I jump in here for?
Yeah.
Can I just jump in for a second? The other thing he knows is that the guy isn't going to kick him in the head. Right.
Exactly.
He also knows he's not going to pull out a weapon. So there's what isn't going to happen, as well as what you've witnessed happen several times. But in a real world self-defense situation, there are no fucking rules. So
there are patterns. Yeah, there are patterns. And so we can do a little bit of like statistical, hey, I've watched X amount of knife videos and 80% do this, 90% do this, 30% do this. And you can play that game all you want, but you're absolutely right. That 10% on the other end of 90 is still 10%. Shit still happens, right? But anyway, so instead of creating a system that's like, hey, this is like, for instance, in Krav Maga, like going back to the comparisons here, overhand knife is very specific. This is how you do the defense. You grab, you do this, you do this. So it's at ABCD. Well, I don't know when the knife's going to populate. I don't know how it's going to populate. I don't know how big the dude is. I don't know where it's going to come from. So instead of creating a system of ABCD, what we essentially created was a chain wrestling system so that we can teach you the most common positions that we see in real fights. Not, again, like I'm making an over-exaggerated example for a reason, not deep half. You know what I mean? Like we don't see that populating in real life. But what we do see very naturally is half collar ties, shirt ties, 2-on-1s, like very general positions, big, gross, ugly overhooks and underhooks. So we put you in all of the most plausible situations for self-defense. What are these positions? For us, that's the inside 2-on-1, front side 2-on-1, outside 2-on-1, back position, overhook, underhook, front headlock. Those are going to be like your primary, okay, look, if I understand how these positions work, I'm covering basic stand-up wrestling at this point. Now, what's the most important thing? Yeah. So the most important thing for us to get people to now start to understand not only how to execute these things, but be able to adapt to them is they have to get a ton of reps. So then the idea is, how do we create a system built to help people appropriately practice? Because the other big problem that I saw in a lot of martial arts, and again, this is coming from me teaching, what I believe is I look back on the first 9 years of me teaching and being like, man, I was teaching super inefficiently. I was teaching a lot of ways they did older wise. So now instead of looking at it and saying where most people go, where it's like I do an outside defense counter, drag to the outside, take the knife away. That was one rep. And now you go and now I go, we go back and forth. Well, how can I get as many reps as possible in the shortest period of time? And not only that, but create a system that people will actually consistently train. Because how many people go to a 16-hour training on a weekend and then they might actually pick up one or two things. So let's say they pick up 10% of what they learned over the weekend. And then they might actually train after the weekend 20% of that 10%. You know what I mean?
It's all very small percentages, man. Like you've invested the time, you've taken, which meant you had to give up something else, which means you have to come back to that something to cover that, to make up for the time that you took away in order to do it. It's a very small percentage of people.
Yeah.
And then also, like, practically speaking, like if you're talking about the firearms thing, like I have to have range time. I have to have access. I have to, be in a place where I'm not going to be limited on what I can and can't do on the range, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's a very small percentage.
Yeah. So what we tried to do was solve that problem the best that we can. We understand, look, like, you're not going to go back to whatever it is, your Krav Maga gym, your kickboxing gym, or just your job as a law enforcement officer or whatever your real life is, and be able to commit additionally on top of what you already do, 3 hours a week to all of this. So what if I told you that once you do this training, I can set you up with very specific drills to practice that if you did them for 5 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. Now, keep on. This is the long game. Like, you're going to do this every week. But if you did 5 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week, and plug it into whatever you're doing. So if you're going to show up to your jiu-jitsu studio, grab a buddy and warm up with these drills for 5 minutes and then go do your jiu-jitsu class. So now instead of 60 minutes on the mats, I'm spending 65. You know what I mean? So how do we solve this problem? Well, to me, that's through chain wrestling and flow drills. I'm constantly staying in contact. I'm flowing from one position to the next, which means it's not a static drill. It's an actual drill. There's energy, there's degrees of difficulty that we teach people how to do it so that they'll actually get something out of the training course. Our material could be the best thing in the world. Somebody else's material could be the best thing in the world. But the only impact the individual is going to get is what they do after the training. So like, for instance, I'm heading to Connecticut in 2 weeks, and I'll be hanging out with Rob Mago with Manchester BJJ and the Officer Survival Series, which he runs an incredible program for law enforcement, and he's an incredible instructor. But we see those guys for 2 days. The last time we saw them was last March. So it's been 11 months since I've seen them. So if I see you for 2 days, for us, it's only 5.5-hour days. So they're getting a total of 11 hours of training. Okay, so I see you for 11 hours. What have you done the last 12 months? That's what's going to matter. So instead of, going out and saying, look, I'm going to teach you these very intricate, specific things, it's like, look, these are the most common positions. These are the things that we see out of people as far as like stabbing goes in the highest percentage of situations. My objective is to boil this down to the most primal version of wrestling that you could understand. And more importantly, get you to get hundreds of thousands of reps in 11 hours.
Efficiency, right?
Yeah. And then how to be able to actually be able to train this moving forward. And that to me is the biggest, I guess, long-term gain. And so we've coupled that training program with the online program so that everybody that attends our in-person ones now has an online resource that they can go back, they can see all the training drills, and they can actually practice. So long story short, Knife Control Concepts, if you come to our level 1, is in the stand-up position, we look specifically at the 2-on-1 outside control. So what happens if I get stuck on the inside, and how do I work from the inside to the outside, and understanding all of those positions. It's not specifically to get to the back. It's to understand, what are my answers for the inside? What are my answers for the front? What are my answers for the outside? What are the answers to the back? How do I transition through these positions and execute on any one of them? And then on day 2, we do a pronated attacker and a supinated attacker, us on top and in control. And so if I understand, like, I should say this in reverse, if I can't control somebody on the ground when I'm on top and they haven't entangled me, then I can't even start talking to you about how to fight off your back with a knife, right? So it's obviously degrees of learning how to train. Yeah. So that's what the KCC level 1 is. And we break it up in a manner where the concepts, hence the program name, Knife Control Concepts, the concepts tie from standing to pronated on the floor to supinated on the floor. And everything that we do across the board ties right back into the first initial drills that you learn. That way you can actually practice it, you can actually absorb it. And you're essentially learning good top pressure management, good movement, hand and blade awareness, and how to get in and out of these various positions that you're going to see very commonly, like, if you go to a Craig Douglas, like a Shiv Works, and you go to ECQC, and let's say you get to a split seatbelt or a back gift wrap, you're going to go, oh shit, this is the back gift wrap. And I'm going to say, absolutely. Right. And now that we got you there, now you can do whatever it is that you want. Maybe you want to dump somebody on the floor. Maybe you want to go and access your gun or your knife, and now you want to go on the offensive. Our job is in between entry and exit. We live in that space. It's like, if you're law enforcement, you have a different set of things you need to accomplish. If you're a civilian on your own, you have a different set of things you need to accomplish. If you have your weapon or don't have your weapon, you have different options that you need to accomplish. So our job is to teach you how to navigate that maze. And then you can plug that in to enhance anything that you do. So if you carry your knife or carry a gun, or the different context of I'm going to defend or I'm going to deal with an attacker differently if I'm out with my 7 and 5-year-old than I am if I'm out by myself. I'm going to deal with that differently if I'm out with myself and my wife without our kids versus if I'm out with, all 4 of us together. So those are all completely different fights. And I can't go, here's the answer to a straight stab.
Each
Here's
one
the
of them.
answer to an overhead. Yeah. So instead, we teach you how to freaking wrestle, how to get a ton of reps doing it. And we only focus on what we have seen to be the most plausible positions of control.
Yeah. So you just went through a really good explanation of sort of the curriculum. And I think people that have been through some combatives classes, whether it be with, blades or firearms, they're listening to this going, yep, this makes perfect sense. And they also heard the beginning part of that was like, I went through this amazing class. I learned so many things, but I really haven't practiced it since. Because it's very hard to do unless I have a partner or I go to a particular academy or school, BJJ or whatever, self-defense academy, that we're actually drilling this stuff, which is the harder thing to do. But, you talk about the different positions, the 2-on-1 position is an example. And I think as people are bouncing around and they're looking at these things, like me, I'm being exposed to it through whether it's social media or otherwise. I'm hearing you. I can visualize this stuff. This isn't you reinventing the wheel.
No.
This isn't you. Yeah. So this isn't you coming up with like, this is the method. It's more like we've seen and done a lot of methods and we see a lot of other people doing those too. And what we're just trying to do is simplify it, not dumb it down, but simplify it so that we can deliver the methodology through but that's based on a philosophy that we know we can't teach you everything. So, and we know that if you get yourself in this position but can't handle this position, it doesn't matter. So we have to focus here first, and that is really the simplification of what is and can be a very complex problem set without overcomplicating it.
And it makes it actionable. And I think that's the big thing is you can actually you can take this material and put it into play.
Right.
And again, practice it in small blocks. You know what I mean? And that's where, you're on the money with the way you're assessing this from the other side is it's simplifying it into a package and making it actionable. And that's always been the biggest problem for me. And so honestly, I was really just trying to solve my own problem, my own struggles when it came into it. And I think that's how a lot of things are developed. It's like, man, where have I struggled and how do I solve that problem? And I wonder, I bet people are having the same problem. So yeah, you're on it.
It's not only, the people that are training that way, it's also the coaches trying to figure this out or the people that are in charge of coaching people with regard to, I want to give them everything I can possibly give them, but I also recognize that there are limitations here. So this goes to the law enforcement question. I mean, I think we can, any law enforcement officer knows this, whether they want to admit to it or not, where they fall in line in the pecking order and how that might impact them. And a lot of the public now, or a lot of the people, let's just say in the space that you and I spend a lot of time in, or spaces that we spend time in, will tell you they're just very undertrained. Law enforcement, there's just no amount of money that's being spent now anywhere that will give a law enforcement officer or somebody in that genre enough training to be equipped to deal with all of the things. It usually comes down to a financial thing, but it also comes down to a bureaucracy thing, like what's important, what's not. And so if you're out there as a coach and you're trying to deliver to another coach that was actually now in charge of regularly training, at the academy or officers in their additional training time or whatever else, it's really important that you're able to do and articulate and then do what you just articulated in a very concise sort of way, because they're going to get minimal exposure to this. However, I might argue it's probably one of the most important things they could possibly get. I mean, firearms training is important. I mean, how do you weigh the two? I don't know, but they are going hands-on with people in a lot of cases on a daily basis. People are making arrests every single day. And there's not always blades and there's not always firearms involved, but you're bringing those to the fight. And if you're not equipped to deal with what happens when the shit goes down, outside of the 3 weeks of self-defense training you got in the academy, obviously this is problematic. So talking about the transition into training law enforcement, or not transition, but your involvement in doing that, was that a hard thing to do? And if it was, like, why? And if it's not, how did this happen? Because again, I keep bringing this up because I'm always intrigued. I see a lot of like private citizens that do a really good job and have really quality products and services to offer. They just really struggle to break across the barrier,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate. I get it, as to why it's not happening in a lot of cases, but it's what I want you to share is like how you did it, so people can maybe try a different approach.
Yeah, it can be a struggle, and I like that terminology a little bit because oftentimes, as coaches or just people in this industry, we have a tendency, just like we were talking about, typecasting different martial arts. We have a tendency to typecast groups in general, and so a lot of people will go like, "Oh, no law enforcement ever wants to train, or no department will ever take me on, or I'll never get a department contract." And it's like, well, you haven't had success yet. Someone will take you in. There's something going on there. So yeah, long story short, it can be difficult. Now, again, I was lucky in regard to the way that I was brought up through this, because the first 5 years that I did this, I worked for somebody else. I mentioned earlier, a
Mhm.
gentleman by the name of Mark Slane. So I was under him, and he previously had, I don't even know how many years of Taekwondo. He was a very highly competitive Taekwondo instructor. And then he was one of the first Krav Maga instructors to go through like the system when Darren Levine had brought it back. So he was like one of the first, I think, 7 black belts in Krav Maga in the United States. So like he had already been building a reputation in Columbus, Ohio, as a gym owner and as somebody that understood, at least some fighting. And then he had one of his students who became one of his black belts, was a lieutenant with one of the local police departments. So like he was already building a network and a reputation. And then I was able to come in as, oh, I'm the guy under Mark. And now I get to meet these people kind of,
Mhm.
through that. So the first official law enforcement contract I ever did was with a local department about 2 hours from Columbus. I won't name any names.
Mhm.
Um, but the police chief there was very proactive, really enjoyed Krav Maga. He had seen pieces of it and trained pieces of it. He himself did boxing, kickboxing, and jujitsu. So he was very proactive. Where you talk about hands being tied is that from a policy standpoint, he
Mm.
only had X amount of funding. He wasn't allowed to force his guys to train. He wasn't like any of these things. So even though he's the guy, he's still limited by, city budgets and department budgets and
Right.
liability and policies
Bureaucracy.
and yeah,
Yeah.
everything that goes into it. So he had brought us out. And so my first exposure to law enforcement was he knew of Ohio Krav Maga, got in touch with Mark. Mark sent me up to do the training because Mark was unable to do the training. So my first contract was handed to me, like
It's
as far as
great.
that goes. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
awesome. So there is a who you know versus what you know thing that you do have to understand. And people can get upset about that all they want, but that's just life. So get out there and network and put yourself out and talk to people
Yes.
and bring people in and expand who you are, or just don't complain about it. Because if you're not putting in the legwork to go meet the people that'll put you in the position and you're not talking to them the way they should or the way you should, then that's going to be problematic. It's not really, it's not them, it's you. Like if I'm talking to, the training officer, I'm going to talk to him totally different. I'm going to talk to him about the tactics in which we've got and how we can teach him how to teach his guys and how we can simplify what they're doing and how we can get their benefits. If I'm talking to the chief, I'm talking to him a little bit different about like, hey, listen, overall, we'll make this very easy to implement into your program. We can satisfy this inside of your schedules and even inside of the shift rotation in which that you work with your department. I'm talking to him about, like public, views and what they're going to see and how this training is not going to make them more aggressive and violent, but more confident in the way that they can get to train. And then if I'm talking to the city manager, I'm talking to them about like, well, if I train your guys up, that's going to lower your, situations of use of force. It's going to lower your injuries during arrests, which is going to bring down any potential for suing, any potential for any workers' comp claims. So like, I can't go to the city manager and say, let me tell you how awesome, wrestling and jujitsu is for law enforcement. Like, they don't care. They
Nope.
care that it's going to save the city money. And I go to the
Right.
police chief. He wants to
And
know
keep you out
that,
of the press.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, so know who you're talking to when you're talking to them, and know what you need to be getting out of the people you're talking to. And that took me a long time to learn. I mean, that's not, we all make our mistakes there, but you have to play the game if you want to get in the game to be able to do that. So you have to know who you're talking to and what they need to go. So I was lucky enough early on to get, that contract was handed to me. I did, I want to say 4 total trainings with them over the span of 2 years. I'm going to be completely honest, man. Oh gosh, and again, this is just to this group, and I know it's kind of the way it is in a lot of places. I just try not to be completely absolute about it. But man, I taught both shifts. They had 2 shifts. I taught both shifts. I had half of them the first half of the day, half of them the second half of the day. One of their guys, a couple of days before I got there, was stabbed by a drug addict and was in the hospital. 2 of the people that showed up put any effort into that in-surface training. Every single one of them were just so pissed off that they had to put in 3 extra overtime hours. They were getting paid to be there, and they just didn't want to put the work in. And the really, like, that was, man, as a young instructor, that was so disappointing, because I still was walking in thinking like, oh yeah, like, man, I get to work with cops. This is awesome. These are the guys I really wanted to get in and help out, and maybe I can learn from them. And like, I had this like, I'm so green and bright eyed, and I'm 22 years old, and it's like, and then I got out there and I was like, man, I was just so bummed, because they were given an opportunity. They were being paid to train. So they were getting paid to do what I love to do, which it just didn't make any sense to me. And I get it. Don't get me wrong. If you're law enforcement, listen to this. I know that there are plenty of psychological issues and time and, whatever it is, and hours. But man, like, I don't know. It was like, your buddy just got stabbed 3 days ago. I'm 100 at the time. I'm like 155, 160 pounds, and I'm working the big guys in here. And I'm not even good back then. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still early in what I know about like grappling and self-defense and jiu-jitsu as in general as it is. And I'm like, man, you're having trouble dealing with me at 160 pounds, and your buddy just got stabbed 3 days. It just didn't make any sense. And it was very upsetting, unfortunately. But it honestly got me to realize what we talked about before, which was like, you need to meet people where they're at, instead of walking in and forcing your expectations on them. And so I usually will spend the first, anytime I do any training, this isn't just in-service training for departments, but anytime I do any training with a group of people that I just don't know and haven't paid their own money to be there. It's a little different when somebody pays $350 to come train with us for 2 days than it is when it's like, hey, this is a work thing, it's an in-service training, or it's a corporate training. The first hour or 2, I really just try to feel them out. I try to make things a little bit easier, a little icebreaker, and make sure that it's in there. I just want to kind of see where we're at, and then I'll meet the group where they're at. If there's 3 guys in there that I can just tell, man, these 3 want to really be here, then they're probably going to get a little more of my attention than anybody else in the class. I'll push them a little bit harder. I'll let everybody else just kind of, go through the motions, still giving them good, solid training, but I want them to be invested in it. So I try to make their experience what they want the experience to be into that regard. And I can't be emotionally invested in the fact that maybe they don't want to be there training.
Yeah, that dude.
So yeah, it's tough, man.
So many things right there. So many things. Yeah, I mean, and so to go back, I mean, that's why I wanted to ask, because, a lot of people are like, yeah, I want to work with the tier 1 guys. I want to work with the people that are out on the, out on the street every day with plate carriers and have to carry a gun and a badge and, order protecting and serving, not understanding that they don't necessarily want to be there. So there's stuff here. First, one, what I heard you say is like, you work with somebody else almost like as an apprentice, so to speak, for a while. You weren't trying to be a big fish in a small pond. And I think there's so many coaches out there in all the different realms, whether it's firearms, martial arts, the specifics of what you're doing with regard to combatives and self-defense, fitness, whatever it happens to be. Everybody wants to be, puff out their chest and be, the expert and show what they can do. And they're doing that in all different kinds of ways. And there's it makes a lot of sense to stop trying to be that for a little while or spend some time with somebody else, knowing while you're there what you should be doing. One of those things is to just learn, right? And part
Yeah.
of the learning is learning how to network and building relationships and taking it all in, and asking questions and so forth. And I think a lot of people are just like, well, I can be an instructor, I can be a coach. All I have to do is, fill out some paperwork, put my name in a building, or start a website or whatever else. Because I got these 10 people that are listening to me and already paying me this. I'm going to go down I'm just going to continue this, and the next thing it'll be 20 people, and then it'll be 30 people. And you've missed so much along the way in terms of the learning process, and you're going to reach a ceiling. The other part about that is the once you're getting in, and those that you're teaching not having skin in the game, which is becoming a real theme on this show from the coaches that are going, look, when I got in, I wanted to teach those guys. Those are the people I wanted to be instructing. So I opened this up with, like there's bureaucracy and there's budgets and there's, policies and things like that within the department. We're talking as a culture about getting not everybody, but the people within I think where you're coming from and who I get to talk to and privileged to hang out with. We're talking about the need for this training. Yeah. We're talking about how we need to fund this training up. Yet we have a major cultural issue on the inside with regard to what is valued, what is not valued. And that's coming from a leadership perspective, right? And it's coming from the hands down. But you're seeing difference in culture when you go to these smaller departments, which you mentioned you went to and still didn't have an awesome experience. But I am seeing like people are like, yeah, if I get this LAPD contract, I got it made, we're done, I'm going to be the guy. Well, first off, the reality of that happening is probably at best slim to none, right? But the other part of that is all the things that you just said about knowing who you're talking to, and how to get in there in the right kind of way, and stop trying to do too much too soon. Who you're influencing and how you're trying to influence them is extremely important. And that's learned over time, like you said. But even if you do influence the right person that, let's just say, has the checkbook or the purse strings, that doesn't necessarily mean the people on the other side want you there. And so the question I would ask people is like, what are you doing to be remarkable so that people want you there? And if they can't get you in that, if they've gotten, let's just say really annoying with their next in command or whatever else, like, hey, I think we really need this training. I really want to bring these guys in and have you check them out and whatever else. And if they won't bring them in, then they want it so bad, they step back and they go, I'm going to write the check for me then. Hey boss, can I get the weekend off? Can I get some time? And I know in a lot of cases, you won't get that time. I mean, I train with people all the time that, that are in law enforcement. They're like, dude, they will not pay a thing. I'm here on my day. I get one day off right now. I'm here. I'm on my own dime. And again, going back to the theme, the great coaches are going, and the ones that I think are really making an impact in their respective, genres within the different spaces are the ones that have stepped back and gone, I want to work with people that want to be worked with. I want to work with people. And by the way, as a citizen on the street, I want that guy, if that's law enforcement, or that person showing up when I need help or when my family needs help or whatever else. So I think we have maybe like this unrealistic expectation that just because we fund it or we make it available, it's going to somehow make a difference. And you would like to think that idealistically it will do that. But the reality of it is there has to be this huge culture shift. And part of that needs to be in the coaches and the things that are being provided out there. Let's stop fucking shitting on one another. So pardon my language, but let's stop doing that and let's get together. Let's spend time together as coaches and find out how we can force multiply our numbers to have to start to change the tide a little bit as we're watching this groundswell. I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox here, but as we're watching this groundswell of maybe younger officers or people that are coming to your classes on their own dime, walk back into their departments or walk back into their particular situations and start talking about it to their leadership to go like, hey, like, this is what I learned. And, the next thing is like, oh, well, why don't you just teach our guys? You're already here. You're already on our dime. And then pushing back, oh, no, you don't understand. It's not that simple. And this is something that needs to be committed to. I'm committed to learning more, but I don't know it all. And there's all these people out here that are doing that. And all those people that are out there doing that need to be okay with other people doing that.
Oh
right?
my
And
God.
not, and
Amen.
yeah, it's just, so again, it's a little bit of a theme, and it comes up almost on every episode. And, for a while there, I was like, I don't want this to get boring and people to think about it. But the bottom line is,
It's
it's a
true.
fucking thing. It's
Yeah.
true, man. Yeah, I don't. So
Well,
that's the
and
next question for you is like, does that just drive you crazy? How do you handle that? I mean, there's going to be haters out there. There's going to be all that stuff. How do you wade
yeah,
through that, man?
that's a great question. And it ties into what you're talking about. And it goes all the way back to, when that first one that I walked into where I kind of got hit with that like disappointment. I walked into it very excited and having a certain expectation. That expectation wasn't met. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's
Realistic,
just, yeah,
unrealistic though. Yeah.
I just had an expectation that wasn't the expectation that happened. And I let that hit me pretty hard. But I also walked into that with more of a, I can't believe you don't want to do this mentality.
The guy
Whereas,
just got stabbed the week before, right?
yeah,
Like, it's crazy to
yeah.
me too.
And,
Just to
and
hear
that's,
it, it's nuts.
well, and that's fine, but we also want to look at it, or at least, again, we also want to, this is the way that I'm looking at it, is like, in my opinion, when you look at those things, that's me paying attention through my lens. This is my rationalization of what should be happening post somebody getting injured. However, other people don't think like me, and everybody has their own viewpoints and things like that. So I think going back to what you said earlier about like wanting to be the dude, and Craig Douglas says this, he complimented us one time with it. And I just think it's such a cool way to look at it. It's the difference between coaches that want to do something versus coaches that want to be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest thing. Like when you look at it and you go like I'm going into these contracts because I'm open to God that anybody that comes into my training, if, God forbid they have to use it, it helps them. Like I can help keep somebody alive. I can help, tailor a situation so that their life, is filled with a little more joy and they can get through these things a little bit better. And if you walk into that because, well, I'm the expert, listen to what I have to say, I'm the guy, that starts to ruin it right out of the gate. And that mentality not only turns off those people that already thought this training was probably going to be stupid, right? But also starts to fuel the problem that we run into, which is exactly as you're saying it. It's like, look, like I can't teach everybody. I feel very good about the material that I put out. I don't think it's the best because I think anybody, the second they think their material is the best, they forget that they have much to learn. Like I know a lot, and I'm also very, very, very aware that there is 100 times more things that I don't know. So like I look at it and go, I am a very good coach. And I also have so much to learn that hopefully will make me a better coach. And the second that you look at it and you go like, well, I'm the best, or this art is the best, or my program is the best, that's when people start getting real closed-minded and they stop learning. And like to your point, learning's a huge part of it. And so when you walk in with that expectation of like, I'm the expert, I'm the guy, you should be listening to me, I can't believe you'd show up for my training, which I used to get very upset when people showed up to training and didn't want to put the work in. I took that personally. And when I started realizing like, look, that's not two things. One, I can resolve this by connecting with those people right out of the gate, not even from a physical standpoint. I'm not going to make up for it like, hey, look how good I am. I'm going to actually try like, hey, man, you're like, why are you here? What's your background? Tell me a little bit about you. I want to know your name. I want to know like, how can I make this experience the best possible experience for you? So then they start going like, oh, this guy's actually pretty cool and he actually wants to benefit something. Like maybe I'll listen. And then you start that relationship by actually connecting with these people. If you can't do that, that becomes problematic. And if I take their actions personally, like they're a personal attack on me, that's just going to make shit worse. So I think the whole idea of like going in and wanting to be the guy or the girl, but wanting to be the person is the biggest problem because it starts to close off how they can actually build trust with you, which they have to trust you, especially in a law enforcement or in-service, law enforcement or military, but an in-service thing because we are talking about their life. Like I'm going to go into them and tell them like, I'm here to teach you how to defend against a knife. This is a lethal force situation. You could die. They have to trust me like as a human to then actually put in the work to learn the thing. So you need to be able to connect. You need to be able to humble yourself and bring yourself back down. You need to be willing to learn. And that to me ties into then the conversation we're having right now, which is if I go over and I look at all these other people, whether whether they've been around longer than me or they're up and coming, like we're all trying to help. I might not agree with everything that you're doing, but if like you said very early on, if you can tell the intention that, man, they are trying, maybe they just don't know yet, but they're trying. Right. What good is it for me to cut their ass down? You know what I mean? There's a section in the back of the book I wrote where I had written this Facebook. It was a rant, if I'm being honest, but it was right when in 2016, when a lot of active shooter training was finally, unfortunately, it's weird to say this, but active shooter training was getting a slightly positive outlook as far as like physical training went. So people were actually seeking out training a little bit more. Everybody was flexing on everybody, man. It was like, I can't believe this asshole's teaching this program and this program is stupid and our program's the best. And it's like, look, I wrote this article and I said, if all of my instructors, at the time, I think I had 10 total instructors, if all of my instructors taught 100 people every day for 365 days, I could not teach like 3% of the entire state that I live in.
Correct.
So you're literally telling me if I worked 365 days a year, teaching 100 new people every single day,
that information isn't getting out there, dude.
It's not getting anywhere. Everybody. And now I'm going to be mad because the guy 20 minutes down the road is trying to do the same thing. And the guy 10 minutes from him is trying to do the same thing. And I'm going to flex on them because I disagree with the shit. Like if you think about it, it's like, if we're really trying to help people, then if I do have a disagreement, let's just sit down and be like, hey man, in my experience, this is what we've dealt with. What are your thoughts on this? Hey, that's an interesting drill. Why do you do it and present it that way? I'm interested to see your foresight on it or your feedback on it. Right. Or just don't. Like, don't get involved.
Say it at all.
Yeah, just stay the hell out of the comment section. But it's so crazy to me because coming up, like I've had so many genuine people actually reach out and help me. And that's, I think, such a positive light and something that supported me along the way. Most recently being Craig. I mean, Craig Douglas, I mean, man, I can't begin to explain how much I appreciate him and the friendship that we developed and the mentorship, over that. Because I mean, he is like, for no reason, he owes me nothing. And he is just really like, he's been there to answer questions. He's been very publicly supportive and given praise to what we're doing with the KCC program and, how Mike Eli and I run the program. And he's got no reason to do it except that he realizes I can't coach everybody and I'm not going to be here forever. And somebody else needs to be doing this. And I've had several people over the years, do that. And I don't understand the flex. Because even as a gym, so like I own a brick and mortar here, obviously, as we've talked about. I mean, maybe we could handle 300 active memberships, like really, maybe. Yeah. So if I have 300 people, like there's a few million in my city. So Same like here. you could literally put 10 jujitsu gyms in the same exact parking lot, 10 self-defense gyms in the same exact parking lot, and we could all do perfectly fine just marketing to the city of Hilliard, which is not a big
theoretically.
City. Yeah, theoretically. If we weren't trying to kill each other the whole time. And it's so fast. Dude, when we started, Ohio Krav Maga and Fitness was in the same parking lot as Rogue Fitness, which is now like this massive, huge fitness business, right? Yeah. We were in the same parking lot. And we did CrossFit and they did CrossFit and they were 5 doors down from us. And guess what? We both had over like 250 members and we're both doing perfectly fine. You know what I mean? It's just like
doing fine, yeah.
It's just fascinating. So you could tell that really gets me hot. Like I wish we did what you were talking about, which was supported each other and shared information and, promoted each other left and right and didn't take things so personally all the time to the point where we could just go out and help people and realize that like, I don't know, man, like anytime I walk into a training, taking back to law enforcement, I mentioned this earlier. I have not done law enforcement. I have not been in the military. So I have no previous experience in any of this. And usually hey, this is Aaron Jannetti. He's running this course introduction is, hey guys, look, my name's Aaron Jannetti. I have zero background in law enforcement. I do not understand what your job entails. I have an idea. People have talked to me, but I have never done it. What I do know is I have a really deep background when it comes to firearms and wrestling and grappling. And I can teach you physical skill sets and the psychological dynamics of violence and fighting. And you can then learn how to apply that to law enforcement. You can learn to apply that as a corrections officer. You can learn to apply that, as a military team and whatever's going on there. But I am not going to say, I have no idea. If you want to talk to me about, I know your job is hard. I have no idea exactly how hard because I've never been there. And I'm not going to act like I've been there. And I'm not going to act like I know better than you. What I do know, I feel pretty confident, very, very, very confident in this subsection of material that I'm going to share with you over the next couple of days. And if you put the time and the work and the effort into it, I promise you at the end of this, you're going to get a lot out of it. And that there, for a lot of people, they'll walk up. Like I had we worked with a group of all the training officers for the Department of Corrections in Florida. And I had almost every single one of them walk up afterwards. And they were like, dude, you walked in with a faux hawk and a beard. And I was going to be like, who the fuck is this guy? He goes, and then the first thing you said was, I know nothing about corrections and I have no intention to act like I know better than you. I'm just here to teach you what I know. And immediately I was like, I like this guy. And it's like, that's the kind of shit that if you can walk in there and just be, that's just honest. That's not even me flexing. That's just me being honest. I don't know shit about law enforcement outside of secondhand conversations I've had. And I try to learn as much as I can, but there's nothing like experience. And being a cop in Columbus is different than being a cop in, Wapakoneta, Ohio versus this. So it's like, I don't try to know anything. I know this, guys. I have this very limited amount of experience. I'm going to share this with you. I really do feel it's going to bring some benefit to you and we'll only see. So give me your attention. Let's put some work into this. Ask whatever questions, challenge whatever you want, call bullshit. I love conversations. Like, let's put some work in and let's see if we can make ourselves better. And if you can meet people at that level, like, man, you can really change people's minds about the industry.
If they want their minds changed. And so that's another big part of this. And I think that's where the culture pieces are important to talk about. And I see a shift happening, and I see it happening from coaches, which is interesting. But going back to the law enforcement thing, there's also this eating your young type of thing in the law enforcement community too, which is going to have to change. That's an even bigger thing. That's not for we're never going to change that. They have to change that. But I think from like a coach's perspective, there are coaches that are saying the same things. It's interesting. I'm sitting here kind of chuckling out loud and on the inside with, I heard this other guy just say that, and guys that we've had on the show that we haven't released yet are saying effectively the same thing. And part of what I hear you doing is you're setting expectations, but more specifically, you're setting boundaries. Like, hey, like this is what we're going to talk about, and this is how I'm going to talk about it, and the reasons why, and what I'm not going to talk about. So let's not bring in this other stuff to this conversation because that's going to be unproductive, right? So if you're telling me about your experience over here, or when you did this at this department and we don't do it that way, and that's why this doesn't work, that is your experience. That was your thing. That is your policy or whatever else. What does that have to do with what we're just take the concepts, take the basics, take the fundamentals that apply across and reverse engineer this thing rather than putting it yourself and being so self-absorbed with your own experience right up front. Because on the off chance that this guy that's standing in front of you might know what the fuck he's talking about, you just might learn something, right? And so again, like I see this stuff going around, and I got you going there. It wasn't the intention, but it kind of was. Like I wanted to hear that. Like it drives you nuts. I'm glad it does, because I think for a lot of coaches, they feel the same way, man. They get heated with this stuff, and they're just like, this is so dumb. Like it's like my good friend Chris Curtis down in South Florida is like, I'd rather slam my head in a car door 10 times than get into this ridiculousness that happens in the comments section on the internet in whatever platform you happen to be in. It's a total waste of time and energy, and you could be spending time like just sending a positive message and being open-minded again, and being open to, I don't know it all. And that the experience that I have had, there's other experiences out there that you just may not have been exposed to, and there's things to be learned by that. And so bringing it back and getting off the soapboxes, you did a really good job there, I think, of giving a shout out to some people that have mentored you. And I think, again, going back to what I was saying before, I think people could really benefit by reaching out for some help, and they'd be really fucking surprised
Yeah.
when they did that, how much help they would get from some of these people. Just like, hey man, I'm glad you reached out. Well, let's chat. And then I've done this a million times. A million might be an exaggeration, but a lot of times I'll just be like, I don't get it. I'm just going to try and I'll DM this guy, or I'll reach out to my buddy who might have that phone number and see if I can get a connection and say, hey man, I got a question for you. Would you mind connecting for a call? Or I'll type it into the DM, or I'll type it into the text message and be like, hey dude, I'm going to call you. And they'll spend like a half an hour on the phone with me going through this thing, where, I was just trying to get a little bit of more information, and that's how much they wanted to give. And again, that's just my piece based on my experience. And you got this consumer that's looking at all this fucking ridiculousness that is happening, in the world of social media and on the internet, and they're trying to find their way in and find their tribe and make some sense of this. It can be really off-putting when they see that stuff going on, and it causes distrust. And if it's causing distrust at that level, then obviously at the next level, and the coaches being the in-between level, the next level up, which is your tier 1 guys, your law enforcement officers, whatever else, they're going to be pretty distrusting too, because if you're that coach and you're sitting in the middle and you're that playing that game of telephone, like so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that, but he didn't really say that. And then you're 25 comments deep and coming into this conversation, it just creates these factions and this separation. And so I love what you're doing and bringing it together, man, and just going, hey, I'm just going to teach you what I know. Take what you can. I'm trying to simplify this the best I can for you, and taking responsibility and feeling a personal accountability to this stuff could save your life. And it's on me because I want to teach you that. If you don't want it, okay.
Well, yeah. And
but I'm going to give it to you.
One of the things that, like, with that is, it's just like, if you're going to do a job, and, I mean, gosh, I learned this from my mom. Like I said, growing up, it was just, she had 3 kids. She was raising them on her own. And it was just like, there's work to do, and if you're going to do it right. And it's kind of one of those things like, look, man, if my job is to come in and give them the best possible experience, then I'm going to come in and give them the best possible experience. So where am I missing that? How can I learn how to get better at that? But one of the things I think is fascinating to like the conversation you're having about like the comment section and things like that. And it's one of the things that like coaches create their own vicious cycles, is you will attract the people that enjoy whatever it is you're doing. So if you're the one constantly out there kind of trashing on people and constantly propping yourself up by pushing other people down, what ends up happening is you start gathering a following of people that's the way they look at it. And the problem with that, from the person that now is the one who started that, is, well, those kind of people are the people that are going to do the same thing to you. So the second that you get a slip up, now you literally have created a following of people that this is how they get ahead anyway. And then you find a lot of people that they run into huge, massive problems with that. Whereas if you try to put out a message, and again, I can only speak to my experience, but when I stopped fighting in the comment section and I started either just simply letting people talk, or one of the things I like to do is I like to actually learn from people that are really aggressive, because there's something in there, to me, any piece of feedback, even the meanest, deepest, most hatred, whatever piece of feedback, there's something to learn from that. And it's like, what can I learn from that?
Truth in everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So I generally try to ask a question or two. And some people kind of, they're just like, I don't know, I don't understand how you do that. But it's just like, well, I'm actually interested because I do want to get better. And maybe I am missing something. There is that element of, understanding, like, again, I know I still need to grow, and I know there is something I can learn. So if somebody has this visceral response to a 3-minute video I got out there, like, what can I learn from, like, why was that triggering? So I am somebody who tries to pick up on that. But ever since I started simply, I guess being more honest and genuine about the idea that, like, I actually feel this way. Like, I actually literally walk into some places and go, how the fuck did I end up here? Because I don't feel like I know enough to be the person in front teaching. You know what I mean? Like, I genuinely feel this. And so when I started being more honest about that in the way I presented videos and how I talk to people on the internet and really just trying to connect with people, I started to attract again, my following's still very small, but actual genuine people. And so I don't have a lot of that drama anymore. So people will ask me that every now and again, like, how do you deal with, these really deep, crazy comment sections? And I usually tell people, like, honestly, the people that actually stick around, they see the videos. The videos aren't like, this is the way to do it. It's like, hey guys, like, here's something we drilled in class today. This is something we do in our program. Try it out, explore it, see if it works for you. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. There's never a point in time where I'm flexing on anybody because I honestly don't know. It's just like, hey, in my experience, it works. But it starts to attract a group of people that are like, oh, they're exploratory, they're open-minded, they're playful with the way they train, they want to learn. I post a ton of stuff on my personal page, about personal development and breath work and ice baths and, understanding communication and language, mainly because it's the stuff that was most important to me and I needed. Like, I was bad at it, man. I was a spite-driven, angry, pissed off, kid in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a father now. I'm a father. I have an incredible wife. I have 2 kids. I have a business. I'm responsible for other humans that I pay. And it's like, man, you got to get your shit together. Like, you got to be able to manage your emotions and you have to have good communication and good language. And I want to be here, when I have grandkids, and I want to be able to run around with those dudes. So it's like, take your ice baths and focus on your stress. And so I do a lot of that type stuff. So I would say 80% of my personal page is more of like this personal development in relationship to fighting. And so I'm not getting I'm attracting people that are still interested in that. And it's been super helpful. And then when I don't, like, we had one video on the KCC page that went viral. I still don't know why. I don't understand social media.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
Yeah. It got like 3.8 million views and like we went up 20,000 subscribers. Impressive. And I was like, what the hell? Like, where the hell did this come from? It was one of those videos that I was like, fuck, it's the end of the day. I haven't posted anything. I don't have any content to post. Whatever. I'll just post this video real quick. And it was like, boo, 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 boo. And that one, oh my God, we had a couple thousand comments on that one. And that's when I started. I don't know if you saw my internet defense comments, little plugs that I would do. But so that's how I answered internet defense comments, was like, let's have an actual conversation. Listen, it's a good question. I get where you're coming from. This is our side of it. It's a good question. This is where I'm coming from. This is our side of it. And every single one of those ended with, just train. I don't care. Just go train. Like, as long as you're training. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, this is my experience. Just go train. Have some fun with it.
I so appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, it's just, you attract the people that you present out to it. You know what I mean? And you surround yourself with those people. And, thankfully, and you can tell, man, because if you look back at my page early, and again, this is like, 10 years ago, 8 or 10 years ago, I was attracting the exact people. And I had a little bit of an ego, and I was young and I was super athletic and I looked real fucking good on video, and I got away with flashy stuff. And then, you mature as a coach and you get through those phases and you start to realize, I think it's the old analogy, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And most of us, I at least hopefully start to kind of mellow out and realize, like, wow, this is a real long journey. And, maybe I shouldn't have that. And you can tell the people that, we attract are the people that are interested in learning, a little more open. And I'd rather have 3,000 people that want to learn and be open-minded than 200,000 any day that are really just trying to get into it because, we actually want to connect with people. So anyway, I don't even know how the hell we started on that one.
No, it's great, man. I mean, I got you going there, and part of that was intentional and part of it wasn't. I just kind of wanted to see kind of what your take is on it. I got exactly what I thought I would get from you, but I'm going to take this back to the beginning real quick. And
sure.
What you said was, before we wrap this up, what you said was, in BJJ, you're a brown belt that's way closer to being a black belt than you're comfortable with. And here's my take on that. What I just heard you say there. What you just said was spoken like a true black belt. That is, you don't know what you don't know. And the further you get in this journey, the more you realize what you don't know. And, I've said this before too. It's like, I'm not an expert in anything. What I'm an expert in is that I know I'm not an expert in shit. And it's being open to that idea and wanting to know more. I'm not trying to achieve expert level on anything because I understand that is never going to happen. Yeah. Maybe that happens in something like, I don't know, fucking computer coding or I use that one because I live in the Silicon Valley. I don't know if that even such thing exists, grandmaster computer coder. But I don't fucking care, because to me, that sounds, number one, it's boring. It doesn't sound fulfilling, and I don't feel like I'm contributing anything with any of that. And sorry to the computer coders out there if that's offensive. It's just like, what am I giving back, or what can I contribute down the line that helps somebody's life be better? And maybe being a computer coder, and you can make a bunch of money doing that, and that helps you do things, in your society, or sorry, in your community, or whatever. I don't know. That's maybe a horrible example.
The second you said computer coder and master, I don't know why, but I went straight back to like Chris Hemsworth in Black Hat, where he was like the hacker.
Yeah,
the whole thing. That's where I was just at, like like the battle of the brains of wow.
Right.
And where did that guy? Yeah, and this is how much I don't know about coding. Is hacking coding? Is it the same thing? Like, I have no idea. I'll stick to fighting humans.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is what I've tended to be good at, or what I've gravitated towards, which I think a lot of people do. And whether that's coding or knife control or Krav Maga, like, it is what it is. But look, man, as we're wrapping up here, you mentioned a couple things that kind of the direction you've gone with your social media, and I want to bring that to everybody's attention if they don't know you. First off, that you provide so much free content, like good, valuable content, out there for people to see, to take in, to contemplate, to comment on, and get commented back to compare and contrast. I think it's all super valuable stuff. I love what you're doing there, because it's simply, you're not trying to be anything that you're not. Which I really appreciate. It's not, it's not flashy. What I mean by that is, it's not the highlight reel. It's just some really basic stuff that's taken in real life, in real time, from things that you've experienced, or things that you see your students experiencing, or maybe some context from things that are happening out there, like a viral video or whatever else. Just that people can kind of wrap their heads around, and you're giving them, I guess, water in the trough to drink from if they choose to drink from it, but you're not forcing them to do it. You're not holding their head underwater, or telling them if they don't, drink that water, or more specifically, I guess, the Kool-Aid, that they're less than. Yeah, they're less than. So, I really love the way you compared and contrasted all the different martial arts that you're into, the reasons why, and the pros versus cons, the defenses versus offenses, across all of them. I think it was super insightful. It was actually really refreshing, and I think most people can probably relate to that. And I hope for those that are dying on one martial art, whatever that is, whether it's Krav Maga or BJJ or Sambo, whatever it is, man, that they think maybe can think a little bit differently based on this conversation, if they're listening to it and paying attention. So, as we're just kind of finishing up here, where should people go if they want to find out more about you, if they want to take a class, if they want to get involved with what you're doing, or work with some of the people that you're working with? How do we get in touch with you, dude?
Yeah, man. Which honestly, I appreciate everything you said there. First and foremost, it's that stuff is so important. I mean, this journey, being in self-defense, finding self-defense, I mean, it was life-changing for me. I mean, genuinely life-changing for me. So, being able to share that journey with people, and hopefully having a couple, not even hopefully, like, I know for a fact that I've been able to do that for other people, which is amazing. So it's really, I really appreciate you noticing that and putting it out there. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Mostly I float on the Instagrams. Most of my Instagram is pushes to Facebook. I try to avoid Facebook like the plague. To be honest, I don't really want to be on any of the socials, but then I wouldn't meet cool people like you, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. It's networking, which we talked about earlier. But anyway, so my personal account is on Instagram is @Jannetti Aaron. So that's just my name backwards. JANNETTIAARON. And then you can catch up and keep up with all of the Knife Control Concept stuff at Knife Control Concepts. That's on IG as well. And then all of the courses that we run, everything, we just keep in, a tap link, or most people know it as like a link tree on the IG. So like all of our courses are listed on there. The online courses are coming, our travel calendar. I've even got some, like, there's a link to the book on there. There's a language and communication program that I took. I don't even get anything for it, but I put on there because it was super impactful for me. So we keep everything on that link tree. And that's all just right on our IG. So for the most part, if you're following us on Instagram, you should be up to date on anything we've got. If you want to join the newsletter, there's a newsletter in that link as well. And then we try to be as easy about the newsletter. It's like my personal one. Usually it's one of the Instagram posts from the week. It's got the calendar of upcoming KCC courses and then any of our YouTube videos. That comes out on Thursdays. People can sign up for that if they want to. And then if you're ever in Columbus, people are welcome to stop into Endeavor Defense and Fitness. We're on the west side of Columbus. Again, we do BJJ, Krav Maga, kickboxing, CrossFit, the whole nine. Anybody that's a listener of Iron Sights, just let us know and we'll bring you in. It's totally free. We don't charge anybody to drop in and train. We host a ton of seminars. We just had Craig in last weekend. I got Rob Mago coming out to do the Officer Survival Series for law enforcement in April.
Nice.
We've got Blackout Grappling coming out in February. We have our KCC training camp in July. I've got Ryan Hoover coming out in October. So we host a ton of seminars here to train. And then if you want to catch KCC, I don't know when this is going to air, but this year so far, we're already booked in Connecticut, Northeastern Ohio, Central Ohio, Hawaii, Utah, Maryland, Georgia, Kentucky, and then we have to be announced with Texas, Florida, and I got a guy in California that's asking, but I don't know if we'll be able to follow through or not. And then Oregon.
You can come here if you want. You want to come to NorCal, man? You can use Red Dot Fitness all you want, man. You're welcome.
Sweet, we'll talk because that would be awesome. I have a ton of people in California that want us to come out, but we haven't had a chance to find anybody to actually host it. So. But yeah, man, we'll check it out. But anyway, we'd love to have anybody out for training. Again, it's myself, it's Eli Knight and Mike Cheney. So definitely go check them out. Mike Cheney is at Boom Boom Cheney, and then Eli is at Night Jiu-Jitsu. But we float mostly on Instagram. That's the best place to find us.
I love it, man. You guys are super organized. And like I said, I mean, you're already talking about the calendar for the year, how busy you are. I love the fact that you're bringing in other people that do similar but different stuff for similar but different audiences. I mean, right there, that just kind of is the umbrella statement over everything that you've been talking about today. So refreshing, man. So good to have you on. Like I said, when we jumped on, I said, I don't know where this conversation is going to go because I don't know a ton about you. This was way more than I expected. So
that's cool,
I know you're a busy dude. You've just articulated all that, all the things you have going on in life and in business. And I can't thank you enough for being here, man.
Dude, it's honestly, it's been an honor. And this was such a cool conversation. It was all the things I like talking about, like growth and mentorship and training and internet and awesomeness. But I appreciate it, man. It's a ton of fun. I don't know. We'll do it again sometime, but hopefully we can actually connect in person one day, train a little bit and do some stuff.
I love that, man. That's the next step for sure. Talk to you soon.
Totally, brother. Well, thank you.